And welcome to another edition of Madden Benz Unfiltered. Tim Benz and Mark Madden with you. Glad that you're with us as we roll into another week. A short week for Mark. He won't be on 105.9 The X all week. I'll be in for Mark part of the week. He's got vacation coming up. We'll get into Aerosmith travel plans a little bit later on. But Mark, first and foremost, while you're gone, does the losing streak continue for the Pirates, or do they get back on track here soon enough against the Colorado Rockies?
Well, they better get back on track against Colorado because Colorado ain't good. And they better replenish their confidence because they just look like last year's team a little bit over this 7-game losing streak. They're susceptible to bad becoming worse. Their pitching, their hitting, the fielding. I mean, none of it's been good, Tim. The one light in the black has been Brian Reynolds. And even yesterday, he went hitless. So they better figure out something. But then again, 20-15 after 35 games ain't bad. You'd have taken that before the season started.
Sure. The big picture is it's way ahead of schedule, but then again, the schedule wasn't supposed to be all that impressive. And speaking of unimpressive schedules, the Pirates, I think, have taken advantage of lesser teams. Although, they did beat the Red Sox, I know, 3 games early. They beat the Dodgers when the Dodgers were still in a down cycle. They've ticked up recently, of course. The AL East, though, is chewing them up right now. They do have the Orioles on the horizon after Colorado.
The AL East is going to chew the AL East up. I mean, they're going to be good teams in that division, don't make the playoffs. You can't realign the divisions every year, but boy, that's just tough. All 5 of those teams are close to playoff caliber. The Pirates got to get a good start tonight from Mitch Keller. He's supposed to be the future ace, so he can be the stopper now against a bad team. The Pirates obviously got to hit better, but then again, they don't got many good hitters, Tim. They forged an identity, and I give them major credit. They forged an identity out of the new rules, specifically those that encourage running and stealing bases, because of the 2 pitches to, 2 throws over to first base to hold a runner and then the bigger bags, but you can't steal first base. So their identity disappears when they don't hit.
Yeah, that's something we had talked about before. Now it's looming as something that's a problem for them because they are so dependent on causing chaos once they're on the base paths, but they got to get there first. And I think something we're seeing as well, Mark, especially in that Tampa Bay series, it's what other teams do to the Pirates that I think is a sign of catching up more so than how they counter the run game of the Pirates.
Well, yeah, don't let them get on base. That's how you counter the Pirates' running game.
No. I mean, other teams are now doing to the Pirates what the Pirates have done to them. I think
I think running and stealing is up all over MLB.
Yeah,
that's not a surprise. The Pirates just exploited it so much, so well, and so quick that it was like a shock to the system. Probably not least theirs.
So the hitting has gone south. The pitching has gone south. Which one is the biggest concern about being able to find its footing again? Because, well, I think they're both a concern. But when you look at the lineup, I think what's catching up to them right now, and they were able to keep it at bay for a while, is the loss of O'Neal Cruz. G-Man Troy being out as well certainly hasn't helped either. Andrew McCutchen only had 1 at-bat against the Blue Jays in that series. I think the pitching is roughly what the pitching is going to be. But I just don't know if they're going to be able to sustain the hitting that they had early in the season.
It depends how many good hitters you think they have. And one, O'Neal Cruz, like you mentioned, is out. Sawinski, I think, is hit or miss. I think you got to keep him in the lineup. Bay was hot for a bit. Connor Joe's been hot for a bit. But these guys aren't. I mean, are they even really major league starters, Tim?
A lot of them aren't. No, I think a lot of these players that they've relied on and gotten so much production out of early in the season maybe aren't starters in a lot of the other playoff caliber teams.
Early in the season, when they were going good, people talked about, last year they didn't have many good players and now they do. I think they still have a lot of bench players starting. Maybe they're just better bench players. Maybe they're legitimate major leaguers, but they can't play every day and produce consistently.
Well, like Derek Shelton said, I think we're more sustainable this season because we've got the veteran influence that can stop a streak like this. Well, okay, let's see it. I mean, now's a good time to see it. It's been 7 games, so let's see that influence.
Like I bought into it too much. about how Kutch is going to hold this team together.
Or Rich Hill or Santana.
Yeah, you can only do that so long. You can't shine excrement.
All right, so that's some Pirate talk. Pirates fans want to hear from you about where you think the team is with the 7-game losing streak. Are they crashing back to reality? Is this a course correction? Is it just a bad snap? What do you think?
I got to say, Tim, I got to say, I thought they were good enough to not have losing streaks like this. I thought they had at least improved that much, but, I was obviously wrong.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, this is where optimism, because we haven't seen reason to be optimistic, sort of blurs the reality of what 162 is all about. There are a lot of people saying right now that, it's just a 7-game stretch in a 162 season. Well, you can also say it was one good month out of 5 if you wanted to. I mean, we can spin this however we want. The bottom line is it's a long season, and eventually they're going to find their level. Now, their level in the NL Central may not be so bad because while they were losing, like the Brewers lost 6 in a row while the Pirates lost 7 in a row.
Yeah, but people who were watching the standings and saying, well, they may have lost 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or now 7 games in a row, but they're still in first place. Oh, okay, whatever. I mean, look at how they're playing. That's what you do in May, is you look at how they're playing.
All right, so we do want to hear from Pirate fans. Mark, let's get to the Stanley Cup playoffs and what you're noticing there. Biggest surprise so far in the second round, what is it?
The biggest surprise is that I picked Dallas to win the Cup after the first round because they had the only remaining elite goalie, and right now he stinks.
Ottinger, yeah.
Yeah, he let up 5 goals in the second period to Seattle last night. So that, to me, really is the biggest surprise. Maybe Bob playing great in Florida's goals, the second biggest surprise. I'm not surprised that Florida's up on Toronto because they became the proverbial hot team with the way they played against the Bruins in the first round. I am surprised it's 3-0, but now I'm just hoping Toronto can win the 4th game at Florida so we get the elimination game at Toronto for Game 5.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by that. Granted, Seattle being up on Dallas is a surprise to me because, like you, I thought Dallas at this point could go on to win the West. I thought a 7-game series between them and the Oilers would be a hell of a lot of fun to watch. If Seattle mucks that up and gets to the conference finals, so be it. But I just didn't see a potential sweep coming from Florida at all.
Yeah, and, the Edmonton-Vegas series is great. It's very entertaining. Although, as I mentioned, I just sent a Trib column and a notes column. McDavid did that interview after the 5-1 win by the Oilers on Saturday, and boy, he's drier than the Sahara. It's just sad that the NHL can't get a charismatic superstar, let alone one in a big market. I saw the interview the Hughes brothers did for New Jersey. They have some potential. They have that kind of boyish charm, and they look like they're 18. So, but that's not – I mean, is Newark a major market?
No, they're not a major market team, even though they play.
Tony Soprano was at the beck and call of the New York bosses. That tells you all we need to know, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to use that as a litmus test, and you know what, I do. And that 18-year-old stuff isn't going to last forever. I think they're good, but they're not McDavid good. And we've talked about
Jack Hughes. He ain't McDavid good. He might be just the next level down, though.
What would that next level be as a comp, say, when Sid was at his peak? Who was the next level down, say, from him and Ovechkin at that time?
Let's make it simple. Malkin good.
Malkin good? You think he could be that level?
I can see Jack Hughes winning an MVP.
Oh, I can see an MVP. I don't know if it's going to translate into like multiple cups or anything, but hey, McDavid's got to win a cup too. If we're going to use that as the bar that he's got to jump over.
With the flat cap, Tim, the cap's been flat since the pandemic, right?
Okay.
With the flat cap, the talent's been spread even thinner. The cap has made the league even more equal. So I don't know if you're going to see multiple cups by anybody. All the weirdness in the playoffs is a result of that flat cap.
Going back to a topic that emerged last week after we saw a lot of the big market and big name teams eliminated, as far as being a draw, like you said, the best player playing in a remote location without much personality. What is the best end result out of both conferences for the NHL? I think in terms of interest, it's Edmonton and Toronto, but I don't think in terms of ratings that's the best because it's 2 Canadian teams and a small market Canadian team at that in Edmonton.
That's a good question, Tim. Okay, out west we've got Vegas, Edmonton, Dallas, and Seattle. Dallas is the biggest market. In the east we got New Jersey,
Florida, Toronto.
Florida, Toronto, and Carolina. The fact that I almost forgot Carolina indicates that them winning wouldn't be great. I don't know. Newark, I mean, can you star Newark into New York? Maybe New Jersey and Dallas.
Yeah,
Then again, I remember, Tim, when that was the final and it didn't draw flies.
Exactly, right. Now, they play a different brand of hockey. I think they're both playing more exciting brands of hockey, but it is funny. I think the best matchup would be Toronto potentially winning a cup for the first time since 1967 against Edmonton with McDavid, but that gets nobody watching south of the international border, and that's a bad thing.
Part of that is that the NHL doesn't market its stars properly. If McDavid was perceived as big a star as his stats and performance indicate he should be in America, then that series would be a draw. If you promoted Austin Matthews, an American player in Toronto, like he should be, but they haven't done that. They just refuse to do that, don't know how to do it. Those guys are dry. All that adds up.
That's a question for hockey fans as we move forward in the playoffs. What to you is the most potentially interesting matchup for the Stanley Cup final? And with the Penguins being out, I know a lot of people have kind of tuned out hockey locally. I still think there's some good hockey going on. I think we've seen some more interesting, more skill-oriented hockey, Mark, than some of the goonery that we saw in the first round. That's not entirely out, but it's getting better.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm watching. I am mesmerized by the Edmonton power play. Mesmerized. It's the best power play I've ever seen, and it's simple.
I was just about to ask you that. Are you mesmerized by the fact that they don't overcomplicate it like not only the Penguins, but too many teams do?
Move it, open guy, shoot. Move it, open guy, shoot. The open guy shoots, it doesn't matter who it is, and they cash off the rebound, like Draisaitl has done repeatedly.
Yeah, and Draisaitl can bury his own when he's the open shot, too. And then the rebound comes to him sometime, like you said, and then he buries those. And actually, I think he's been better than McDavid so far in these playoffs. Now, McDavid had the 2-goal game the other night against Dallas, but for the most part, not against Dallas, excuse me, against Vegas. But I think for the most part, Draisaitl has been the better player in these playoffs.
Oh, he has 13 goals.
Yeah, I think he's carried them, and I think McDavid's sort of caught up here as the series against Vegas has moved along.
Yeah, let's get McDavid through the neutral zone is still amazing. And he does have 15 points, Tim, 5 goals, 10 assists. He's amazing through the neutral zone and zone entries on the power play. He's the straw that stirs that drink. And without those zone entries, that power play wouldn't be what it is.
Let's get to some football, Mark. The accolades keep pouring in for the Steelers and what they've done in the offseason. Now, CBS gave them an A grade for their offseason entirely. I might give an A grade for the draft. I'm still more in that B to B plus range overall for the offseason. I think they could have done more at the linebacker position than just kind of wait for a 4th-round depth backup at outside linebacker. And I keep making the point, I think there were better players at inside linebacker that were still very affordable that signed for not too terribly much more than the guys they got, who I don't think have as high of a ceiling. So I'll give them a B plus for the offseason so far. Is some of the hype about where the Steelers have made improvements not translating to actual wins that you think you'll see next season?
They need help at inside backer, and they're not going to get it till next offseason, hopefully through the draft. Those inside linebackers aren't any better than last year's inside linebackers. And as we conveniently forget, because they don't have good inside linebackers, the 3-4 defense funnels everybody to the inside backers. So, it's that pincer thing from the outside. So I think they need help at outside backer, at edge rusher. I don't think counting on Herbig's brother to just morph into a guy who can be the third edge rusher is a smart move. Somebody suggested signing Kyle Van Noy. I think that was Pro Football Focus. I'd be all for that because Watt's going to miss at least 5 games. I have no doubt about that at all.
I'd be in favor of it too, Mark. I don't think he'd be lost on the inside either. I think he could play both backer positions for the Steelers if they needed him to. He's been one of the more versatile linebackers in the NFL for years.
Yeah, but at 32, Tim, I'd hesitate to put him at risk much, playing too much. I'd want him as a backup on the edge because you need that desperately. Because like I said, Watt's going to get hurt.
Agreed. And I think that's a perfect example. If you didn't bring it up, I was going to about Van Noy. That article popped up. And everybody was like, yeah, get him. They need him. They got to get him. Got to get Van Noy. Well, that's an indication then that if the first guy you can think of is him and they've got to get him to help the team, then there's still improvements that need to be made. I think everybody was sort of excited about the draft and what they did, as was I. But if you look at the hierarchy of the AFC, I still think they're a 10-win team, and that's not assuring much of anything besides a wild card.
Yeah, they're a 9 or a 10-win team. Colin Cowherd called them sneaky good and said that they were the 9th best team in the AFC, and that's about right.
Well, if they're sneaky good, then that's sneaky worse than last year because they were a 9-win team last year.
That reflects how the AFC is a juggernaut and how teams have improved even more than they have, and they have.
But the standings would be worse then if they're 9th because they were at least 8th last year. You're right. I mean, I think some teams will be better next year. Like I think the Browns will be better if Lamar plays the whole season.
Well, there's the assumption now, Tim, the New York Jets will jump over them.
I don't know if that's an assumption. That I think some people are assuming that. I don't. I don't know how that's going to.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What and what about for instance,
I hope
the
not.
Chargers?
I can't stand Rodgers, but
you think anybody else the Chargers or maybe the Dolphins take a step back? Is that possible?
I don't know. I mean, I just don't think the Steelers. If you made me bet right now, I'd say they don't make the playoffs. I think there's too many teams better than them. Too many quarterbacks better than Pickett.
And you don't have as much faith, clearly, as the public does, that they're going to open up the playbook and he's going to be able to assimilate in that playbook and have a more potent offense.
He threw a touchdown pass. He never threw 2 touchdown passes in a game last year. Mm-hmm. What was it the CBS Sports guy said? They ranked the quarterbacks. They ranked him 28th. They said more of a late game battler than an efficient starter, or words to that effect. And that's true. We're basing everything optimistic about Kenny Pickett on 2 drives. On 2 drives. We're ignoring the bulk of his work in favor of 2 drives.
How much does the run game get better to alleviate that then with the improvements they made along the offensive line?
It'll get some better. It's just not a running league. I mean, I love when I go on Twitter and I read that, defense wins championships and they can possess the ball. Okay, what are you tweeting from 1970? I mean, it's just not that kind of game anymore. You got to score a lot of points. I always go back to that Eagles game, Tim, and I know the Eagles are and were last year exceptional, but they beat the Steelers, what was it, 31-9 or something like that, some, lopsided score. And the Steelers had the ball for 34 minutes, which is an eternity by today's standards, right?
Yeah, but the Eagles didn't need it.
The Eagles scored 4 touchdowns before they ever ran a play in the red zone. That is football today, like it or not.
Okay, Mark, let's get to some questions here. Oh, by the way, did you see the thing in the NBA last night where Jokic shoved the Suns owner in the scrum underneath the basket?
He's not the Suns owner in that situation. He's the fan, and he wouldn't give him the ball. So Jokic shouldn't have shoved him, but the owner should have been thrown out of the game. He's a fan interfering with play.
I just, when I saw what happened, I read it. I thought the same thing you did. Then when I saw what happened, it was like, it's not like Jokic was going to grab the ball and initiate a fast break. I thought he overreacted too a little bit in shoving him because it's not like he was going to get the ball right away and inbound.
The fan can't grab the ball. Jokic is not at all at fault. The fan grabbed the ball. He just happened to be the owner.
I don't think that Jokic should be responsible for recognizing who he is. Like some people are acting like he should know.
Jokic should have even got a tee. A fan grabbed the ball.
All right, so we'll talk about that too. Let me get to some comments here. We start with Eric, who said, Pirates took care of not so good teams, but as soon as they play some talent, they get completely handled. Does this mean that maybe they were never really all that good to begin with, or is this just a typical slump that every team goes through at some point?
First off, this question's way too long. When the question fills up the bottom part of the screen, it's too long.
I think both things can be true, don't you? I think this could be a typical slump, and I think it could also be an indication that they're not as good as we thought that they were when they got off to that wicked fast start.
Yeah, I think both are true. But the question was still too long.
Richard says Dubas to the Pens may not be off the table yet, especially if Toronto gets swept by Florida. Yeah, that's something we didn't talk about here, Mark. We got into it more in the podcast if people want to hear us really dive into that. But quick synopsis, what do you think? If they are swept out, if they end in inglorious fashion, is all of a sudden Dubas back on the table as a potential for a replacement for Ron Hextall?
I don't think he's off the table until he signs a contract somewhere. Do you?
No, but I thought that once they finally got by the one playoff that they needed to get to
Don't
break that
forget, Tim,
streak.
this isn't just about their success in Toronto. It's about money and power for Dubas. Will he have final say without Brendan Shanahan interfering? And can he get more of both here or wherever? Now, working against it is it's a terrible job right now in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's an aging team that has 8 players with some form of no movement clause. It's not a job anybody really wants. And if I were Dubas, quite frankly, I wouldn't want it either. I hope he takes it, though.
Sam, something similar to the first question of the Pirates, victims of better teams. I think they've been playing better teams. They've been losing to better teams, but oftentimes, especially that Tampa series, they set themselves up to be victims of themselves, too.
I don't understand the use of the word victim. I mean, you win or you lose. But
well, if they were victims of better teams, then I guess they were just beneficiaries of a bad schedule early on. I mean, I don't want to, paint with that broad of a brush, because then I think it minimizes what they did in April, if we're going to use that analysis.
They're 20-15. They don't stink as bad as we thought, at least not yet.
Calvin says, how does the NFL not have the schedule ready to go? Why would it be delayed? Is it delayed?
Is it delayed? I don't know anything about that.
Last I heard it, unless something happened today, last I heard it was supposed to be the 15th. That was the first date that I heard.
Right, Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. We make too big a deal over that. Okay, we already know who everybody's playing. We already know where all the games are. But then when it comes out in a certain order, we try to predict differently than we would have before we knew what the order was. It's just dumb. But it shows how the NFL gets every single football fan and the media too to bite at every hook they throw out there.
Well, honestly, that's why I thought it might be delayed a little bit more, to sort of distance itself. Well, I guess I get it, because then mini camps start and OTAs start, and you actually have the players to talk to. But I actually would have stretched it a little bit more, like, do it over Memorial Day weekend or something like that. Give you a couple more weeks after the draft.
Tim, I'm on record as saying, and I'm glad I'm off Thursday, and if this casts aspersions on your performance, sorry. Any radio host who goes through the schedule game by game to protect their record is guilty of lazy content.
I'm not going to go game by game. I think the only thing that comes up with the schedule reveal is, like, where does your favorite team get screwed with the Thursday night game? I mean, like,
I think it's fun to see how many primetime games they get, stuff like that. But to act like it affects the record is dumb.
I think
what affects the record is the injuries that occur. You know what I mean? How you actually play. The order of the schedule, it would mean something if you could predict the results game by game in a vacuum without injuries, etc.
You could always go back and look at how the schedule was revealed after the fact and say, well, they benefited or they didn't benefit from, like, for instance, the Steelers, they had important games that were winnable that they didn't win because they didn't figure themselves out at quarterback, and Watt got hurt early, and they were a mess on defense against teams that they ended up needing to beat by a half game or a game. But that's after the fact.
That's after the fact. That you got to play the games. It's like giving the draft a grade before the guys step on the field.
Well, we do that too, don't we?
I don't.
Especially when the Steelers have a good draft, everybody can't wait to say A+, A-, whatever it is.
Tim, one thing I'm really proud of in my radio career is everything I think is stupid, I don't do.
Michael says, which player lost by Hextall do you think the team would like to have back the most? Tanev, McCann, Marino, or Matheson? Boy, Marino's played a lot better in the playoffs. He even had 2 more assists yesterday, didn't he?
I think the most useful guy to have back would be Marino. If you look at production, I mean, he's out now, but McCann with the 40 goals, but he wouldn't have got 40 here. He just wouldn't have. He wouldn't have been put in a position to get 40. Now, here's a question you could ask from back when he was here. Given that he went to Seattle and got 40 goals, should he be given a better roster spot, a better, depth chart position than Brian Rust? Is he a better goal scorer than Brian Rust?
It's sort of and I think you phrased it this way roughly, Mark, the reason that Seattle is playing well in its second year is kind of like why Vegas was so good in its first year. They have 4 second lines. So if he's on essentially a second line in Seattle, regardless of where they rank it, but ice time and power play time, he's going to get the numbers. He was never going to get that volume here. He just wasn't going to be allowed it.
Yeah, it's like I always say this too. When Vegas had their great, expansion year and made the final, William Karlsson scored 40 goals, and he never has since. He got a big deal. And he does okay, like 20-something. But they had such a good team that somebody was likely to score 40 goals. Same thing with McCann this year.
Eric says, since we brought up the NBA briefly, will Pittsburgh get an NBA expansion team? I know Pittsburgh is
they'll
in the
be in the
NBA.
league next year. That's a good, no problem. They got a team coming in. I think LeBron's going to come here and play with his kid, and Keith Dambrot's going to be the coach.
They're that close, Mark. It was USC or Duquesne, that close to getting Bronny. I'm sure they're second best, second choice, right?
Yeah.
Your alma mater almost had LeBron's kid.
Well, you know what's going to be amazing? The machinations that take place to get LeBron and the kid on the same team.
Oh, I don't even know if they're going to have to work that hard to do it. I think it's just going to be like drafting Peasy's kid. Get LeBron's kid.
Well, right. But what if, like, let's say LeBron's still with the Lakers, which he probably will be, right?
Yeah.
Let's say a team before the Lakers rates LeBron's kid ahead of, like a team picking ahead of the Lakers wants LeBron's kid. Then they pick him and they get LeBron.
Well, that could happen. Yeah. Or I could see LeBron just.
Here's my dream scenario.
Yeah.
Where's the worst place to play in the NBA?
Well, it used to be Sacramento. It used to be Sacramento until this year.
Vancouver? Oh, they moved.
They're in Memphis now. Yeah.
See? So it's a really bad place.
It's a terrible place to play.
I mean, who finished last this year? Like who?
Well, I mean, it had been Sacramento for decades until this year.
Okay, say like a crap team picks him, okay?
Yeah.
And LeBron goes, well, we want Bronny in LA and they want to trade to get him, right? And that team says, nope.
Well, yeah, this is what I see happening, actually.
Because
I know what
the league would want LeBron to get his way because the league is run basically for LeBron. It really is. I mean, not to an exclusive degree, but the league figures what's good for LeBron is good for the league. That's how the Lakers got great out of nowhere again, even though they, had a horrible regular season, with their load management, whatever. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm implying, but it did come out of nowhere. And now, but if a team drafts, but the kid's not that good, that could work in favor of LeBron and his kid. Like if the Lakers have a decent team next year, LeBron might drop to them. LeBron Jr.
Finally, Mark, this is the most random question I think we've ever gotten. Will Unfiltered honor the writer's strike? Wait, you think this show has writers? What, are you kidding me?
No, we won't.
I mean, if this show had writers, they should have been fired a long time ago.
I'm not even sure what that means.
Yeah, the writer's strike, the TV writer's strike. You aware of that?
I am, but I'm not even sure why he would think that it would remotely affect this.
Are you technically still in SAG-AFTRA? Do you have to be anymore? Because the X isn't union, right? And you're
I'm not in, no.
Yeah, you're not in the union anymore, right? I technically have to be. So I don't know if I'm breaking protocol by crossing the picket line or what, but I am.
I don't know. All I know is I got my Aerosmith tickets. I went to Tesoro's in Cleveland yesterday. Liverpool's won 6 in a row. I mean, I'm trying to concentrate on something besides the writer's strike.
All right, so you got yourself the number one priority of the summer, which was to get your Aerosmith tickets. Four different destinations, right? Pittsburgh, Columbus,
Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Columbus, and Newark.
All right, so Mark is heading on the concert tour. He's off this week. I'll be in with Tom throughout the course of the week. Tom starts things off on Tuesday. I'm in Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Thursday, big NFL schedule reveal show, game by game. Pick the teams, win and loss, and I'll just come up with 9 and 7 anyway, like I always do. And I'll do it for Madden Benz Unfiltered for this week. Mark, have a good vacation. We'll see you next Monday.
See you next Monday.